Ladies and gentlemen, right in the heart of Southeast Asia, a region long known as a land of peace, trade, and cooperation, an unprecedented crisis is unfolding quietly, yet with gripping intensity. Along dusty red dirt roads and winding border trails, waves of Cambodian villagers are silently abandoning their homes. Not to travel, not in search of a distant dream, but simply to find electricity, to fetch clean water, to smuggle home a few liters of gasoline, just enough to light a single evening or cook a single pot of rice. Old motorbikes creak under the weight of plastic jugs, carts, and suitcases, anything that might carry a bit more of life's essentials in a time when even a bottle of rainwater feels precious. A 60-year-old man in Bante Mianche walked nearly 15 kilometers to bring home a few liters of fuel. "I don't dare turn on the fan for my grandchild," he says. "It's scorching during the day and full of mosquitoes at night. But with no electricity, what choice do I have?" Elsewhere on the border, a young mother struggles to fill a 20-liter jug at a public tap in Thailand, one arm holding her baby, the other balancing plastic bottles. "We don't have water to cook or even wash our faces," she sighs. "Water now is more valuable than money." What has pushed the Cambodian people to this point, where electricity is a privilege, gasoline a luxury, and clean water traded like a rare resource? This isn't the aftermath of a natural disaster, nor the doing of some external enemy. This crisis is the direct result of a series of political decisions that seemed minor on the surface, but carried devastating consequences, beginning with a leak of personal information, escalating into diplomatic tension, and spiraling into a full-blown, self-imposed blockade of trade and energy. In a world where borders were thought to be open, where economies are tightly interwoven, a country cutting off its neighbors' access to fuel, electricity, and water is like shutting off the oxygen valve while still on life support. And Cambodia, with nearly 17 million citizens, is paying the price. Fuel prices are soaring, food is scarce, remittance flows have stalled, and above all, public trust is unraveling. But to truly understand how things fell apart so suddenly, we need to return to the beginning, where a political rift within a ruling family sparked a regional crisis. Because sometimes it's not economics or security that lights the fuse, but personal secrets laid bare. And that's what sets off a national earthquake. It all began not with electricity prices, nor with fuel shortages, but with something seemingly unrelated: an audio recording, a personal photo, and a dramatic decision by Cambodia's most seasoned politician, Hun Sen. In June 2025, a private recording between Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Tarn and the President of the Cambodian Senate, none other than Hun Sen, was unexpectedly leaked. The motive was unclear, the purpose even murkier. Yet within 24 hours, the clip had spread like wildfire across Thai media. What truly ignited public outrage wasn't just the conversation itself, but the manipulative tone of Hun Sen, a man who may have stepped down as prime minister, but never truly relinquished power. Under mounting internal and public pressure, Thailand's prime minister announced a downgrade in diplomatic relations with Cambodia, suspending several bilateral energy projects, most notably the cross-border high-voltage electricity transmission lines. It was a clear warning shot, but Cambodia did not respond with diplomacy. Instead, it retaliated with an unprecedented wave of drastic measures, sealing its border with Thailand, halting imports of electricity, fuel, and consumer goods, and canceling all local-level trade cooperation programs. The Cambodian government called it sovereignty defense. But in truth, many experts saw it as an emotional backlash, turning personal political wounds into tools of national governance. And in the midst of it all, it was the people, those who had no say in taking sides, who bore the brunt. From political conflict, a new kind of war emerged. No gunfire, no tanks, but just as devastating. Electricity, gasoline, and clean water became weapons. The national power grid dimmed, with rural areas getting only a few hours of electricity each day. Gas stations shut down, black markets sprang up, and prices skyrocketed by the hour. What's even more alarming is the complete lack of preparation. No backup plans were announced, no arrangements for alternative imports were made, and not a single apology was offered to the people, those now living in darkness, not because of natural disaster, but because of a political storm born from within. International observers quickly labeled the situation a new kind of energy war, where fuel is no longer just a commodity, but a political lever, a means of punishment and deterrence among neighboring governments. Tragically, Cambodia chose to turn that weapon on itself. Not besieged, but self-blockaded. Not isolated, but willingly severing the lifeline sustaining its national economy. At this point, the story is no longer about scandal or diplomacy. It has become an economic suicide unfolding hour by hour, day by day, as Cambodia, through its own decisions, slowly strangles the lifeblood of its nearly 17 million citizens. And what follows is a chilling wake-up call about the consequences of short-sighted political maneuvering. A nation breathing through a supply tube and choosing to clamp it shut. No one could have predicted that in today's world, so deeply intertwined by trade and energy, a nation would dare to pull its own plug from the very lifeline it depends on. Yet, that is exactly what Cambodia did. By closing its border with Thailand, a partner that supplies 27% of its fuel and 25% of its electricity, the Cambodian government made a move likened to shutting off the oxygen valve while still on life support. In a country without an efficient oil refinery, without large-scale independent power generation, and without a robust domestic supply chain, cutting off the flow of essentials from Thailand was akin to letting go of the survival lever. Cambodia's entire economy, already fragile after the pandemic and global inflation, instantly plunged into severe imbalance. With no alternative suppliers, no strategic reserves, it was as if a wounded patient had ripped off the bandages before the wound had healed. From the capital Phnom Penh to border provinces like Banteay Meanchey and Battambang, gas stations began shutting down or selling fuel at skyrocketing prices by the hour. The power grid scaled back, leaving some areas with only 4 hours of electricity per day. Small businesses couldn't run their machines, goods couldn't circulate, and people were thrown back into the dark, using well water, firewood, and oil lamps as if rewinding to decades past. What's worse is that the government seemed to have underestimated the domino effect of its decision. Shipments from Thailand, which made up the majority of Cambodia's essential goods, were halted completely. Supermarkets in Phnom Penh ran out of fresh vegetables, milk, and frozen meat. Traditional markets saw sudden price spikes, vendors had no products to sell, and people began hoarding supplies, fearing a prolonged shortage. A quiet storm of anxiety and chaos rippled from the border all the way to the heart of the city. Experts have called it an economic suicide that required no external shock, just a chain of poorly vetted decisions made without internal checks or real-world data. Cambodia simply doesn't have many regional alternatives. China, though a long-standing strategic partner, lacks the immediate infrastructure to replace the lost fuel, oil, or electricity. Vietnam, cautious amid a sensitive geopolitical climate, has kept its distance, and landlocked Laos can offer only limited logistical support. In other words, Cambodia has dug itself into a deep hole, with no nearby ally close enough to help pull it out. And so, as power lines flicker off, as gas stations shut down, and as clean water must be brought in by motorcycle from the other side of the border, the most visible collapse is not yet economic. It's the inflation that starts in the kitchens of the poor. Vegetables are no longer fresh, meat and fish have vanished, rice is being hoarded. The Cambodian people, long used to modest meals, are now surviving on thin porridge and expired instant noodles. They don't talk about politics. They simply ask one another, what's left to cook tomorrow? Since the power lines went dead, the gas stations were blockaded, and the borders locked tight, Cambodia has spiraled into an uncontrollable chain reaction. In many northwestern provinces, like Banteay Meanchey, Otar Meanchey, and Poi Phet, once bustling trade hubs with Thailand, blackouts now stretch from morning deep into the night. Power flickers on for only a few unstable hours each day, not nearly enough to run a fan, cook a meal, or keep a fridge running. Hundreds of vendors have had to abandon their goods as food spoiled, shrimp and fish rotting on their stalls. People turn to generators, only to realize that having a machine means nothing without fuel to power it. Gasoline prices have soared, 30%, 40%, even doubling in some places. But that's just the surface. Beneath it lies the grim reality of hundreds of people secretly crossing into Thailand each day just to bring back a few liters of fuel in old soda bottles, torn plastic jugs, even tightly knotted plastic bags. These are not scenes from wartime, but from July 2025, in peacetime, in a modern world supposedly thriving in the digital age. With no electricity and no fuel, transportation of goods has ground to a halt. Delivery trucks stand idle for lack of diesel, freight trains sit still in their yards, and traditional markets are deserted because there's nothing left to sell. Green vegetables have shot up in price by 40 to 60%, meat and fish are now 1.5 times more expensive, and the poor have resorted to watery porridge, sometimes just one meal a day. For those in remote areas, eating is no longer a routine, it has become a daily survival challenge. Clean water has also become a serious concern. With power outages, underground pumping stations have shut down, and water treatment systems have stalled. In Phnom Penh, entire neighborhoods queue with buckets, basins, and jugs, timing the trickle of water just to catch a few liters. People have started boiling rainwater, digging makeshift wells, or using unfiltered water from ponds and lakes. Reports of rising cases of diarrhea and intestinal infections, especially among children and the elderly, are beginning to surface. All of this has created a simmering wave of discontent across society. The public no longer believes the grand speeches on television. They look instead at their kitchen stoves, their utility bills, their children studying in the dark, and meals that grow more meager each day. Patience, once the invisible wealth of the poor, is now running out, little by little. And yet, the crisis doesn't stop there. Beyond electricity, water, and food, Cambodia is also losing something equally vital yet often overlooked: the remittance lifeline from over 1 million migrant workers in Thailand, sons and daughters who serve as financial arteries for millions of families back home. But now, with the border tightened and diplomatic tensions still unresolved, even that steady monthly flow of money is being choked off, darkening an already bleak crisis with an even colder shadow. For many years, over 1 million Cambodian workers in Thailand have quietly kept their home country's economy from collapsing. They are construction laborers, domestic helpers, seasonal farmhands, and factory workers. People who left their villages early, endured long days of 10 to 12 hours of work, and sacrificed time with their children just to send home a few $100s each month. Those seemingly modest sums, when combined, totaled $1.2 billion annually, nearly 5% of Cambodia's GDP. A silent lifeblood sustaining millions of family members back home. But now, that lifeblood is being choked off. When Cambodia chose to shut its border with Thailand, it wasn't just goods that were stopped. People, too, could no longer cross freely. Border checkpoints became stricter, remittance processes more complex, and many workers were asked to return home, some because of expired paperwork, others because diplomatic tensions disrupted their jobs. Many chose to come back, carrying only a few bags of clothing and a sense of unease. But back home, there was nothing waiting for them. No reintegration policy, no unemployment insurance, no social safety net strong enough to catch them. Thousands returned empty-handed, forced to rely on aging parents or fall back on farmlands that had long been abandoned. Families that once depended on remittances to buy rice, pay school fees, or afford medical care suddenly found themselves without any income at all. The result, domestic purchasing power plummeted, small shops shut down, people pinched every penny, hoarding bags of rice and bottles of medicine. Meanwhile, the foreign exchange market shook as the inflow of US dollars dried up, causing the Cambodian riel to steadily lose value week by week. And it wasn't only the poor who felt the impact. Even commercial banks, long reliant on remittance flows to maintain liquidity, began to worry. They saw withdrawal rates spike while deposits shrank. Some rural credit unions had to suspend operations, and many money transfer points closed down due to the lack of transactions. Trust in the financial system began to erode, and in a country where most people don't have bank accounts, a collapse in confidence can spark chaos faster than any statistic can measure. The remittance blockage is not just a financial problem. It's the opening act of a much larger crisis, where the government is steadily losing its ability to manage the economy, markets lose their psychological anchors, and people lose their sense of direction. And the most terrifying part is this: no one knows how long it will last. The border remains closed, diplomatic tensions are unresolved, and the government's response so far is little more than vague statements in the press. From power outages to food shortages, from halted remittances to mass unemployment, an unprecedented pressure now weighs on the shoulders of the Cambodian people. And in that bleak landscape, the next storm begins to swirl. A vortex of inflation, where money seems to lose its value before your eyes, and the state stands helpless as prices climb, day after day. As remittances slow, electricity vanishes, fuel grows scarce, and food prices soar, the next inevitable threat strikes. The very thing any fragile economy dreads most: inflation spinning out of control. In Cambodia, everything from rice, salt, and cooking oil to medicine and clean water has started climbing in price by the day. This is no longer a matter of monthly percentage increases. It's a reality where people wake each morning to find their money has lost yet more value overnight. The riel, already a weak currency, has grown even more brittle under the weight of panic and real-world shortages. In the first few weeks, the Cambodian government offered no clear response to stabilize prices. There were no price control packages, no food subsidies, no large-scale essential goods distribution systems like those in neighboring countries such as Vietnam, Thailand, or Malaysia. National reserves were thin. The budget was running a deficit, and foreign currency holdings weren't strong enough to effectively intervene in the market. In desperation, the central bank began selling off US dollars to support the exchange rate, but each intervention lasted only a few days. Every sale chipped away at the state's ability to protect its own economy. At a Rusi market in Phnom Penh, a vendor reported that in just 3 weeks, vegetable prices had doubled, cooking oil was up 70%, and many imported medicines had disappeared from pharmacy shelves. The poor began cutting meals, replacing meat with salt and vegetables with rice water. Cases of child malnutrition surged, public hospitals overflowed, but they too suffered from power outages, drug shortages, and a thinning workforce as doctors left the profession or emigrated due to the prolonged crisis. A sense of unease spread when prices rise and wages don't, when expenses outpace earnings, and when people see no solutions from their leaders. Trust begins to collapse. A country only truly stands when its currency is trusted, no matter how little it's worth. But now the riel has lost not only economic value, it has lost emotional value. Citizens began hoarding US dollars, gold, rice, anything that could hold its worth, except their own national currency. And that is the clearest sign of an economy breaking at its very foundation. More and more people are starting to ask, how did it all go so wrong so quickly? The answer doesn't lie in a single number or isolated decision. It lies in a series of compounding mistakes, in treating politics as the centerpiece of every policy, in choosing confrontation as the default response to conflict, and in overlooking the basic truth that the well-being of the people is the highest pillar of any nation. And for that reason, Cambodia's crisis is no longer a domestic issue. It has become a wake-up call for the entire region. Because in an age of globalization, where every country's interests are interwoven through borders, trade, energy, and labor, a single misstep, even by a small nation, can ripple out with consequences far beyond its borders. Cambodia, through its tragic freefall with no way out, has unintentionally exposed the most fragile fault line in Southeast Asia's foundation of stability. Not a single gunshot has been fired. No tanks have rolled across the border, no fighter jets have roared over the skies of Phnom Penh. And yet, in silence, Cambodia is enduring a full-scale war of attrition. Not just a war over electricity, fuel, or food, but a battle over trust, governance, and a nation's ability to defend itself against the consequences of its own missteps. And the most terrifying part, no one from the outside is attacking them. Every crisis has come from within, from emotional decisions, misplaced priorities, and a governing apparatus increasingly disconnected from the daily realities of its people. But Cambodia is not an isolated country tucked away in the mountains. It is a crucial link in the regional supply chain, a trading partner with Thailand, a neighbor to Vietnam, a collaborator with China, Japan, and many major economies. When it locks itself down, it's not only the Cambodian people who suffer. Regional businesses see supply chains disrupted, investment flows stall, and trade agreements suspended. And more alarmingly, a dangerous precedent is set. Politics can bend the rules of economics, and when that happens, no nation is truly safe. In the heart of Southeast Asia, once hailed as a basin of peace and growth, cracks are beginning to show. A nation weakened by blackouts, shaken by lost trust, and paralyzed by a lack of direction. A government unable to stabilize prices or calm markets. A society where people must cross borders just to find clean water or a few liters of fuel. This is no longer just Cambodia's story. It is a warning to all. Vietnam, Thailand, Laos, Indonesia, any country in the region could face a similar collapse if transparency isn't protected, if citizens' needs aren't heard, if national interest isn't placed above personal rivalries. In an era of globalization, a single wrong decision costs more than just domestic trust. It risks a nation's position and the region's security. And when a country chokes itself, opportunists on the outside won't sit idly by. Cambodia doesn't need a war to fall. All it takes is a crisis of trust, and that alone is enough to shake the foundations of society. This is not the time for mockery or apathy. It's a time for the entire region to face reality and ask, are we truly prepared not to become the next victim? If you believe this message matters, if you think Cambodia's story is a lesson that should be heard far and wide, please like this video to help it reach more people. Subscribe to our channel for continued coverage that is thoughtful, timely, and deeply human. Every share you make is a small step toward building a Southeast Asia that is more understanding, more alert, and more resilient. And always remember, politics can be a dangerous weapon, but it is the people's daily life, their well-being, that always bears the brunt. Don't let one wrong decision today become a disaster that haunts an entire generation tomorrow.